has a little scar right here on the bridge of his nose. He got it on some wild childhood adventure, riding a garbage can down the slide. I myself have a little scar right here that I got in a construction accident when I was a child building a snow fort. Now, Frank and I know these things about each other because we have an intimate relationship. But everybody's faces in the congregation tell some kind of story. You know, we have age spots that show sun damage, and we have frown lines and worry lines and smile lines, each of them telling some story of our personal history. A professor at the Stanford School of Business has her students pair off at the beginning of each semester and stare at each other for 3 whole minutes. Her theory is that our facial expressions and our ability to recognize and mimic the facial expressions and emotions of others help connect us and help in communication. It helps us learn who the other person is. While this exercise is certainly awkward, it's a powerful teaching tool. Can you imagine what it would be like to do this exercise with Jesus? What would we see when we really looked into the face of Jesus? The first thing we might notice, says Mark Batterson, the author of If, the book that has inspired this sermon series, is the scars spanning his forehead. Like a barbed wire tattoo, the crown of thorns left its hallmark in the flesh of his forehead. But it certainly erased any question mark about his love for us. Jesus wore a crown of thorns so that we could be crowned with righteousness. His scars revealed the physical pain that he endured for our eternal gain. Jesus was human. He felt what we feel. He was the embodiment of God's love, walking around among us so that we could get that message right, so that we would know non-violent, sacrificial, all-inclusive, proactive, life-giving love. I'm sure we would also see worry creases and laugh lines too. Because as human beings, we mess up. We are works in progress, and it takes us a while to get it right. See these worry lines right here? These are etched on my face by my children and the people that I love. Jesus carried the whole weight of the world as he carried his cross to Calvary. He certainly would have had worry creases, but also laugh lines. Think about all those times that Jesus broke bread with people. In fact, he hung out with such a wide variety of people that the religious leaders of the day accused him of being a party animal. He loves us. Our joys are his joys. When we get it right, his eyes sparkle. Oh, his eyes. Can you imagine looking Jesus in the eye? My dad had the most expressive brown eyes. When he told me childhood stories like Peter Rabbit's stories, his eyes just danced with delight. And in my teens, not delight, right? Those brown eyes could look at you so fiercely that he could put me in my place with just one look. I'm sure that there could be fire in Jesus' eyes. They must have burned with passion when he drove the money changers out of the temple with his homemade whip. I bet Peter got to see a look of approval. Peter was that outgoing, quick-acting disciple. You know, the one that stepped out on the water to walk in faith to Jesus? The one that was the first to know that Jesus was the Messiah? The one that Jesus called Peter, the rock, the foundation of the church that he was about to build? But I think there was also another look that Peter experienced. When, on the morning of his greatest failure, it was just took a split second in the plot line of the crucifix, but it likely changed Peter's life. Right after the rooster crowed, Jesus turned and looked right at Peter. Peter had just denied Jesus for the third time. Fear, humiliation, despair that his career as a disciple was done. I can only imagine what Peter felt when he heard that rooster and looked to Jesus. Jesus could have called him out right then and there, and he would have had a spot on the cross next to Christ. But instead, when their eyes met, it was a look of utter love and forgiveness. Just that one look, Jesus said, I love you, I forgive you, I know who you are, Peter. You're going to keep going. I love you. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And that is a look that I think he gives us. I think we have a mistaken idea that Jesus is watching us to catch us doing something wrong, like Ben Stiller's father-in-law in the movie Meets the Parents. The former CIA counterintelligence officer played by Robert De Niro keeps signaling his son-in-law, right? But I don't think he's saying, I love you. I think he's saying, I got my eyes on you, and that's a threat. God is always watching us. In fact, he never takes his eyes off of us, but he's like a parent watching over us. He loves us too much to look away. Theologian A.W. Tozer said, what comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. How we understand, how we think who God is, dictates how we see ourselves and our future. So when you close your eyes, what snapshots of God are developed in your mind? A grandfatherly judge sitting on a throne? A good shepherd carrying home a lost lamb? Jesus on the cross giving his all? Or the risen Christ sitting on the right hand of God interceding for us? That's the image that Paul gives us here in these verses in Romans 8. Paul, like Peter, had a life-changing experience with Jesus. As a highly educated rabbi, steeped in the Jewish tradition, he had refused Jesus' radical message of love. Today, we would have considered him a terrorist for the methods that he used to stop people from following in Jesus' way. His first encounter with Jesus left him blind for 3 days. When his eyes opened, he saw all of life differently. He understood Christ's message of forgiveness, and Romans 8 is his powerful explanation of salvation by grace. We've been working our way through this chapter for the whole month. This is the crescendo, the climax, the finale. Paul is making his closing arguments, and he does it through questions. In just 5 verses, he asks 7 questions. The first, which we've previously discussed, is if God is for us, who can be against us? The answer God did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all. So God is for us. God loves us. The next life-altering question Paul asks is, what can separate us from the love of Christ? And the answer, nothing. We are more than conquerors through Christ. We are champions, my friends. We are champions, my friends. And we'll keep fighting to the end. We are the champions. We are the champions. I can't sing that next line because it's no time for losers. This is where the analogy ends. Jesus hung out with losers. That's the whole point. He loved changing people. He loves helping them live into their what-if possibilities of their God-given potential. And nothing, no dangers, be they physical or spiritual or even cosmic, can separate us from God's love in Jesus Christ. God loves us. No if, ands, or buts about it. You might not feel like a champion or a conqueror on a bad day. On a day that you've been struck down with the realization that you've been going about life all wrong, like Paul. Or on a day when the rooster crows and you realize how deep your failure has been, like Peter. Or perhaps you're in pain, a season of great frustration, or deep grief. If you are in a place that you can't even ask, what if? Take heart. The Spirit is with you. Christ is for you. God does love you. When Paul was writing to the Ephesians, he wrote, "And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the Lord's holy people to grasp how wide and how long, how high and how deep is the love of Christ, and to know that this love surpasses all knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all with the fullness of God." I have used every analogy I can think of to help you understand that God's love is unconditional, all-inclusive, immeasurable, and everlasting. But logic isn't going to get you into God's love. God's love is beyond logical. It's theological. The only way to receive it is through surrender or a leap of faith. In summary, no condemnation for those who are in Jesus Christ. Let go of your if-only regrets. The Spirit of God lives in us. Therefore, we have an obligation to live as if we have the Spirit. We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him and who have been called according to his purpose, God's what-if purposes. And we are more than conquerors. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. No if, ands, or buts about it. This is the message of grace that Paul desperately wanted us to believe in and found our lives on. There's a game that lovers play. It's called the I Love You More game. They gaze into each other's eyes and seek confirmation from the soul of the lover that just as we give ourselves, we'll be accepted and loved in return. And in our hunger for that love, we whisper, I love you more. Christ really and truly loves us more. It's not a sentimental love that depends on us. It is bound together with blood, sweat, and tears. And it is a love that wants the best for us. If you want this love, if this is the love that you want to shape your life around, if you want others to look into your eyes and see Christ's love in you, if you want an outward and visible sign of this love, then I invite you to come forward in a moment. Come to the altar and pray with me. Come and receive Jesus. Come and renew your commitment and accept the anointing. If you don't want to come forward, you don't have to. You can come and let God come to you in the quiet sanctuary of your own heart and then express it in the faithfulness of your living. But today, if you want an outward sign of an inward direct decision, then come.